Welcome, dear one, to Whispers from the Cottage, a quiet place where stories help you slow down, breathe deeper, and remember how safe it feels to rest. These gentle bedtime tales are written for women who carry too much to remind you that softness is strength and that stillness is healing. Tonight's story is called The Message She Never Sent. It's about a woman who rediscovers honesty, tenderness, and the quiet courage of staying true to herself. So settle in, close your eyes, and let the night hold you while the story begins. The quiet beginning rain had started in the dark hours, the kind of silver rain that does not argue with the city, but joins it, softening the corners, turning sound into tread. In Amsterdam, rain is never merely weather. It is a tempo that asks for smaller movements, a slower step, a longer glance, an extra breath before a door opens. The canals welcomed it with barely a tremor. The bridgestones took it into their old memory, and shown Eva woke to that hush. She lay still as her eyes adjusted to the grey-blue of morning, the color of pewter cooled on a windowsill. Beside her, Thomas slept on his side, a steady line from shoulder to ankle, breathing in a way that made the blankets rise and fall like a lake in miniature. She watched him without reaching to touch. Habit, not distance, kept her hands to herself. In long loves, gestures become seasonal. Some belong to autumn, some to a rain-heavy spring. This morning felt like a hand resting on the table, not a hand reaching across. Knew it! She slid from bed. The wooden floor met her feet with a friendly chill. In the kitchen, the air held the faintest trace of last night's tea and something else. Wet brick, damp tulips downstairs in the entry hall, the rain-mottled street. She lit the burner and listened to the bright, small hush of gas catching. The kettle was a familiar silhouette, steel gone soft with years of steam. As the water warmed, she pressed her forehead lightly to the cool window and let the city come to her. Cyclists leaned under their hoods like letters bowed by ink. A woman in a yellow slicker walked a dog with an expression of philosophical patience. A tram sang its low bell from a place she couldn't see. Someone laughed one note, then silence. The world arranged itself without drama, like a carefully made bed. On the counter, her phone rested in a pool of quiet light. One notification, a single pulse, his name. She did not reach for it at once. A whispered rule she used for herself. Add a breath between impulse and action. One breath to prove you have a choice. She counted to 5, then lifted the phone. Good morning, Michiel had written. Utrecht began the day in rain too. I wondered if yours sounds different. Cities have accents, don't they even in weather? Her smile came before permission. She typed, "Here it sounds like someone turning a page, slowly, careful, not to tear anything, but not afraid to read on." She added a small cloud emoji, then deleted it, then left the sentence spare. Michiel was not a stranger, and not a friend, not in the daily sense. She had encountered him first in a forum for editors and designers, a place of threads and good intentions, where people traded notes on fonts, automations, and the small mechanics that make words move cleanly across screens. Their first exchange had been about the wonky behavior of a typeface at certain sizes. His answer was both exact and forgiving. Over weeks, their replies stepped slightly beyond the tidy fence of usefulness into weather, coffee, a photograph of a window that looked like a thought. She did not know much about his life beyond the shape of his days. He rode a bicycle with a soft, clicking chain. He liked cafes that remembered to put hooks under the counter for bags. He owned a plant that obeyed no rule and yet lived. He did not overshare. She appreciated that restraint, like one appreciates a well-made chair. Not flashy, simply right. The kettle lifted its voice, and she poured water over grounds. The bloom rose, earthy and dark, and she watched it swell and sigh back into itself. Ritual invites time to organize itself. In those minutes, she wasn't waiting for the phone to blink again. She was simply making coffee. Thomas stirred in the bedroom and called her name just once, as if to confirm that she had not been a dream. She answered, moving through the small apartment with the body memory that belongs to morning, 2 mugs, the same spoon, the same small drip on the counter she wiped with the cuff of her sleeve. Thomas appeared, hair obediently messy, t-shirt creased in a way that made him look temporarily younger. He kissed the air near her cheek. "Rain," he said, with the contentment of a man whose schedule respected weather. "You'll like that." "I already do," she said, and meant it. They ate toast with jam, discussing a lamp for the hallway that had become their ongoing joke. He wanted something practical that didn't announce itself. She had fallen for a lamp shaped like a slice of the moon. "A hallway moon," he said now, buttering methodically. "So we live in an art film." His smile was kind. She laughed. Only at night. They parted at the door, he to the tram, she to her desk by the window. Their goodbye was a small choreography. The way she straightened his collar, the way he squeezed her hand once, as if telling her something without words. She watched him descend the narrow stairs, still in love with the sound of his steps on the old wood. Work made its familiar map. Emails, edits, checklists, the civic trust of deadlines. A colleague sent a draft about summer in Lisbon, and she softened the adjectives, set the commas to their true places, removed an exclamation mark that apologized too loudly for its enthusiasm. Outside, rain braided itself finer. At noon she paused, made tea, and without deciding to, opened Michiel's message thread. His reply waited, the page-turning yes. Here, it's more like the sound of someone rinsing a glass. Your city has better vowels. She laughed into her mug. Utrecht has better bicycles, she typed. I visited once, and all the chains sounded tuned. You listen for small things, he wrote. I like that. She set the phone down gently, as if it were something alive that needed rest. Her chest felt as if a hidden drawer had been opened, and inside was a scarf she had forgotten she owned. Familiar, soft, not essential, tempting. The afternoon unfurled with its minor errands. She ironed a blouse, while the radio spoke softly of train detours. She refilled the basil pot with fresh soil and made peace with the plant's indifference. She moved the vase half a hand to the left so the tulips could see themselves in the window. In each action, her mind practiced the breath that lives between wish and will. If an observer had asked her what had changed, she would have said nothing. The kettle still sang when it was ready. Thomas would text at 5 to ask if they needed milk. The rain would end in its own time. Yet, under the day, something had tuned itself. A string tightened by a degree. She noticed more. Her hands, moving from keyboard to cup, were more carefully gentle, as if touching an instrument. In the late afternoon, she put on her coat and stepped out for bread. The air wore the smell of wet stone and yeast. She walked alongside the canal, watching how the ripples erased and remade the world. Bicycles ticked at the corners, rakes chirping like small birds. A child in a red raincoat leaped at every puddle as if trying to teach them joy. She bought a loaf that crackled at her touch, tucked it warm into her bag, and stood a moment beneath an awning to watch the light relax. Amsterdam in rain is a city that mothers you without making a show of it. Careful, careful, it seems to murmur. Take your time. Back home, she sliced the bread and buttered a heel while steam lifted from the cut. Thomas texted exactly at 5. Milk? She smiled. Yes. And lemons. When he came in, damp at the edges, he held the milk up like a prize. Success, he declared. She took his coat, smoothed the shoulder as she hung it. They made pasta, the easy kind with garlic and green things, and ate standing up, then sitting down, then still talking at the sink. It was, by every honest measure, a good evening. Later, in bed, she reached for the lamp switch and watched the room settle into dark. The rain had softened to a whisper. She thought of the message waiting, not because it ached, but because it glowed somewhere inside her. Not on the phone, like the smallest ember, orange and patient. She let the thought pass across her mind and kept breathing long and quiet. The night, generous, kept its watch. The city slept with one ear open. The rain, having told its story, rested. Somewhere between one breath and the next, she promised herself that noticing was not the same as wanting, and wanting was not the same as doing, and goodness could still be kept without denying that a small, bright door had been glimpsed. And then she slept. Between rain and light, the days that followed gathered like beads on a thread, cool, luminous, nearly identical when piled together, each one particular when held up to the light. Amsterdam leaned toward a greener season. The market on Saturday offered bundles of asparagus, like new thoughts. Tulips bowed out, peonies rehearsed their entrance. On mornings when sun arrived early, the canal pretended to be a clean mirror, and on afternoons when clouds thickened, the water wore a thoughtful grey. Eva's desk became her small theatre. A notebook with a broken spine, 2 pencils chewed by ideas, a ceramic dish that held paper clips, and the ring she never remembered to wear at home. She liked the mild scrape of chair on floor, the way her fingers found the same keys each day, the punctuation of tea. Michiel's messages came at no predictable hour. She liked that too, no rhythm except sincerity. Sometimes they were 3 lines about the difficulty of naming a color that exists only in a certain hour of morning light. Sometimes he sent a photograph, a saucer on a table, a tired book whose spine had learned to bow, the pattern rain made on a window that needed washing and never would be, because some things look more honest, unpolished. She answered by matching his scale. A woman on a balcony across from me shakes her rug at 9 every day. I like that. Ritual belongs to someone, not to the clock. Canals taught me patience. He wrote, they never hurry, and yet they carry everything. My favorite bridge has a plank that sinks underfoot. It's easy to miss. I step on it like greeting an old friend. What song? Something between a creak and a sigh. I think it's in E minor. He sent a laughing emoji and then a sentence that took the air out of the room for a moment. I like the way you hear the world. She did not know why the phrase moved her so. Perhaps because being heard had become practical in her life. What time is your meeting? Did you switch the laundry? Can you pick up lemons? And this hearing was aesthetic, not domestic. It made space for her, not demands. It asked nothing, and in asking nothing, it suggested everything. At night, when Thomas fell asleep, with the light still on and the phone screen paling his face, she would slide the device from his hand and set it gently on the table. She loved him more in those small caretaking motions than in grand gestures. Love, for her, had always been tidying the quiet. Sometimes, though, she wanted to be looked at as if she were not already known, not misunderstood, just seen with a newness that says, "You are still changing in front of me, and I like watching it happen." She did not fault Thomas for not doing this. She wasn't sure she did it for him either. Their affection had a well-made center. It did not have an edge that glittered. One afternoon the rain paused, and light poured in with the suddenness of a forgiven mistake. She closed her laptop and took her bag and simply walked without destination. The city encouraging her like a friend whose advice is always, "Go see what happens." She passed a window where someone had hung a string of origami boats. She watched a cat take a dignified step around a puddle. She listened for the E minor creak at her favorite bridge and smiled when it sang, because it always did. She bought flowers she did not need ranunculus again, because they look like patience layered into petals. At the florist, a dog asleep under the table thumped the tail without opening its eyes. She paid, tucked the stems into brown paper, and imagined where in the apartment the colors would ask to be. On the way home, a message arrived. "I may be in Amsterdam next month. A workshop. If that's true, would you consider coffee? No pressure. Only to let our sentences have voices." She stopped under a tree and read the lines twice. The air under branches was a different temperature cooler, smelling faintly of bark and the secret of leaves. She typed and erased, and typed again. Yes, coffee would be nice. Then she added, after a breath, "As friends." She stared at the last two words as if they were a bridge being tested. They held. That night, she told Thomas she might meet a colleague from the forum while he was in town. "The one who sent that article about typographic ligatures?" he asked, half joking. She smiled. "Possibly." He kissed her forehead as if she had sneezed. "Have fun," he said, returning to a sketch of a staircase that looked like a decision. The days built toward the meeting, as if time were quietly stacking chairs in a hall. She noticed the edges of her mirror more than usual. She ironed a blouse she didn't need to iron. She thought about what to talk about that would be both true and kind work, whether the polite politics of the city. She rehearsed safety, and under the rehearsals, a current she did not name. On the morning itself, rain made the glass a storybook page. She left early so that being early would not look like being eager. The cafe she chose was small enough to keep voices from getting lost. Plants leaned toward the light with a faith she envied. The floor creaked under her chair, a nice old sound. She held her hands around a glass of water and felt the cool travel into her. When the bell at the door chimed, she looked up and knew him immediately, not because he matched a photo, but because he matched his messages. A posture that suggested attention, a face that looked as if it had practiced kindness long enough to make it effortless. He smiled, the kind of smile that opens lightly and waits to see if the room wants it. They did not rush. Tea, a pastry whose flakes she tried not to scatter on the table. The talk moved along ordinary lines in a way that felt unexpectedly intimate. Work, the annoyance of software that updates itself in the middle of a sentence. The way rain changes the architecture of a day. He asked questions that were not a performance of curiosity. He wanted to know where she sat to work, and what time she liked to cook, and which bridge sang. She asked about the cafe in Utrecht with postcard walls. He said they would claim the walls are beige, but actually they are the color of old paperbacks you carry on trains. When they rose to leave, the air outside had resumed its gentle rain. They shared an umbrella without language and walked in that two-person rhythm that decides itself. Along a narrow street, they paused to let a bicyclist pass and somehow kept pausing. The canal held the reflection of a window lit early. Someone already making soup, a live proceeding. The city felt as if it had turned to face them, not to judge, only to witness. On the bridge, they stopped, because you stop on bridges, because water requests attention, because something important had entered the room and both recognized it. He turned toward her in a way that was not forward exactly, just present. She looked at him and saw not danger but possibility, and then behind possibility she saw a cost, and behind cost she saw a quiet room with a lamp shaped like the moon that did not yet exist, but could. The kiss did not happen. Not then, not yet. It hovered the way a word sometimes hovers before it is said, the tongue measuring the weight of it. She stepped back and he matched the step, as if choreography had been agreed upon long ago. "Friends," she said softly, not as a rule, but as a blessing. He nodded, and the nod meant, "I hear you. I am choosing this too." They walked a little more, talking about nothing while their bodies listened for something. At the corner, they parted no promises for another meeting, no next time. The city took them back into itself, the way water takes back a dropped leaf, without keeping score. At home, she placed the ranunculus in a jar and watched water make the stems clearer. She opened her laptop, wrote a message, and did not send it. "Thank you for the carefulness. I had forgotten that carefulness can be a language. I felt safe and I felt awake, and I will sleep tonight knowing I can be both." She closed the lid. She made pasta again. She told Thomas about a funny thing a vendor had said. He laughed and touched her elbow and asked if the basil had finally given up. "Never," she said, and watered it, and watched it neither wilt nor thrive, but abide. Much later, when the rain loosened and the room thinned into night, she lay awake and listened to the slight brightness in her chest. Not a fire, not even a candle, more like the glow that lingers when you close your eyes after looking at the window filled with sky. She named it quietly, so quietly it did not become larger for being named possibility, she called it. And then, because naming a thing once is not the same as inviting it in, she let the word go and followed the sound of the rain toward sleep. The meeting Amsterdam had woken to a hesitant brightness, the sort that makes the city look briefly washed and new. Puddles still held the night, but the air had softened. Even the pigeons seemed to walk slower, as though careful not to scatter the light. Eva stood before the mirror, fastening the small gold clasp on her coat. She told herself it was just coffee, a simple meeting between two professionals who had spent too long behind screens. Yet her hands moved with a precision that betrayed nerves, smoothing the collar twice, checking the faint trace of lipstick, adjusting the strand of hair that refused order. Thomas had already left for work, leaving behind the quiet proof of his presence. The cup in the sink, the folded newspaper, the umbrella propped by the door. She paused before leaving, noticing how domestic stillness carries its own heartbeat. She whispered goodbye into the apartment, as if it were a living thing that might miss her. The cafe she'd chosen sat on a narrow street, near a canal known mostly to locals. A single step down from the pavement, its doorway framed by climbing ivy, the sign above hand-painted in letters that had begun to fade, like something that didn't mind being overlooked. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of cardamom and roasted beans. There were plants that had grown beyond their pots, and lamps that leaned conspiratorially toward each table. She arrived early. Habit. Waiting allowed her to study the day, to settle the tide within her. She ordered a chamomile tea and wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the heat map her pulse. When the door opened and the bell chimed, the sound seemed to choose him from the world. Michiel stepped in, rain still glossing his coat. For a heartbeat, she saw him only as motion the easy stoop as he entered, the small shake of his shoulders, the smile that began politely and then brightened with recognition. "Eva," he said, her name landing softly like a bookmark placed between chapters. She rose, shaking his hand. The contact was brief, practical, yet her senses noted everything. The warmth of skin, the faint smell of rain and paper. She gestured to the table. "Chamomile?" he asked, glancing at her cup. "I'm trying to give coffee a day off." He laughed, ordering the same. Solidarity. Conversation unfolded easily, as if they'd been continuing a dialogue paused only minutes ago. The topics were safe work, the quirk of Dutch bureaucracy, how the light here could change the color of buildings within a single afternoon. Yet, under each sentence ran an undertone, a quiet music both recognized and unacknowledged. He spoke with his hands, measured gestures that drew small shapes in the air. She listened with her whole body, leaning slightly forward, the way one does when the words themselves are less important than the rhythm between them. At one point, he told her about a bookshop in Utrecht, where the owner categorized novels by mood rather than alphabet. Melancholy but hopeful, quietly brave, gentle chaos. Where would yours fit? He asked. She considered. Maybe still water, changing light. That sounds like a book I'd buy twice, he said. The compliment landed quietly, but stayed. They lingered until the cafe filled. Outside, clouds folded back into grey. The first drops began again, testing the window pane. She looked at her watch, though she didn't need to leave. Shall we? He nodded, pulling his umbrella from the stand. Let's borrow the city a little longer. The rain had thickened to a drizzle, steady enough for an umbrella, gentle enough to welcome conversation. They walked along the canal, sharing its shelter. Pedestrians passed, shoulders lifted, faces half hidden by hoods. The air smelled of wet brick and bicycles. They turned corners without deciding to, letting instinct pick the route. At a small bridge, they stopped. Boats moved beneath them, low and patient. Somewhere, a bell rang the hour. The sound melted into the rain. Your city is kinder than I expected, he said. It forgives quickly, she replied. It rains so often, there's no point in holding grudges. He smiled at that, and something in his expression open, unguarded, caught her breath for a second. She looked away, focusing on the pattern rain made in the water. Concentric circles colliding, merging, disappearing. They talked a while longer, words dissolving into comfortable silences. The umbrella's edge dripped a fine chain of silver. When she finally turned to him again, his eyes met hers with the calm of someone who understands that silence can be a kind of speech. There was a moment, small but complete, in which the world seemed to lean toward them. The city, the rain, the space beneath the umbrella, all held still, waiting for decision. She felt the tug of gravity, the invitation of nearness. And then she stepped back half a pace. I should go, she said gently. He nodded once. Of course. No protest, no disappointment, only the shared recognition that something had almost happened and that its almostness would live longer than its completion. They walked together to the corner where the street widened. Thank you, she said, unsure for what. For the page-turning rain, he answered and smiled. When he left, She watched him go until he turned the next corner. The rain softened, as if applauding their restraint. Back home, she placed her damp coat on the rack, removed her shoes, and stood barefoot on the wooden floor until she could feel her heartbeat in her soles. The apartment smelled of basil and the faint trace of the meal Thomas had cooked earlier. He was on the sofa, laptop balanced on his knees. "How was your colleague?" he asked. "Kind," she said, meaning it. "Easy to talk to." He nodded, eyes on the screen. "Glad it went well," she said beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. The television played quietly, some program about distant travel. The domestic soundscape, spoon in cup, pages turning, the muted tick of rain returned like a tide she had trusted all her life. Later, when the lights dimmed and Thomas's breathing slowed into sleep, Eva lay awake, replaying small details. The curl of steam from tea, the bridge plank that had creaked, the precise tone of his goodbye. It wasn't desire that kept her eyes open, nor guilt. It was awareness, the vividness that arrives when you notice you are standing at a crossroads, built from choices so gentle they could almost be called habits. She turned toward Thomas, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. He murmured but did not wake. The city outside breathed through open windows. Somewhere, a late tram rolled by, its wheels singing faintly on the tracks. Eva whispered into the dark, not for him, not for Michiel, but for herself. "I am still me," and Amsterdam, half asleep, seemed to him whisper back, "Yes, for now, that is enough." The crossing. The days after their meeting unfolded like pages carefully turned. Nothing had changed, and yet the world had grown a new layer of transparency. Everything visible through something finer, lighter, harder to name. Eva woke, worked, cooked, walked, loved Thomas in the ordinary ways that make a life sound complete. Still, beneath each hour ran a low hum, the echo of a voice she had tried to fold away. She told herself it would fade. Most things did. Rain dries, scent dissipates. She waited for her thoughts to settle back into the rhythm of the city. Instead, they began to circle softly, politely around the memory of that quiet coffee, the reflection of wet light in his eyes, the space that had almost closed between them. When Michiel wrote again, his message was short. "Thank you for the afternoon. I've discovered that some silences I have weight. I hope yours isn't too heavy." She read it, standing by the window, the canal below dark as slate. She typed and erased 3 replies before sending only, "It was good to meet you. My silence is light." Light was the wrong word, but it would do. She put the phone face down and tried to lose herself in the evening. Chopping herbs, music low, the gentle clutter of plates. Thomas poured wine and told a story about his colleague's dog who had learned to open doors. She laughed at the right moment, felt the wine bloom warm in her throat, felt almost safe. Yet later, lying beside him, her mind wandered to a bridge slick with rain and the sound of an umbrella closing. Weeks slipped by. Their messages thinned, then found new routes. Occasional, cautious, no longer daily, but still there. Like a lighthouse glimpsed intermittently through fog. Each time her phone lit, she told herself she wouldn't answer until morning. Each time, she answered anyway. He wrote about small things. A stray cat that had adopted his office. A thunderstorm that rattled his windows. A fragment of poetry that refused to leave him. She replied with weather reports from Amsterdam, with thoughts about kindness, with fragments of her own she didn't share with anyone else. The correspondence became a place suspended between them, a room that existed nowhere but the space between send and receive. One evening in early autumn, he wrote, "I'm back in your city for 2 days. There's a new exhibition at the Photography Museum. You'd like it portraits of strangers who seem to know you. If it's not unkind, perhaps we could see it together. No pressure, truly." She read it twice. The apartment was quiet, except for the sound of Thomas in the kitchen rinsing dishes. She could smell soap and lemon. She looked at the message again, at the word unkind, and felt a strange tenderness for his choice of it. To be careful with someone is its own language. She waited until morning to reply. "I think that would be all right. Midday, the museum cafe afterward?" When they met, sunlight lay across the canal like glass inside. The museum rooms held stillness. Faces stared out from photographs, eyes filled with stories they would never tell. They moved quietly from frame to frame, speaking in half sentences. Sometimes their hands brushed as they leaned closer to read a caption, and each time the touch startled them both like a chord played by accident that somehow completes the song. Afterward, they sat in a cafe, the air filled with the scent of espresso and varnish. Her tea cooled as they spoke about art, memory, the strange intimacy of looking. He said, "Maybe we recognize ourselves in people we'll never meet because we need to." She nodded. "Maybe that's safer than being recognized by someone we do know." He looked at her then, and the look was a long exhale. Outside, the city glowed with that mellow gold reserved for late afternoons in September. They walked without plan, following the water's bend. A wind from the west lifted leaves into small, dizzy dances. At a narrow crossing, a boat passed beneath them, its passengers laughing into scarves. She leaned on the railing, the iron cool under her palms. Michiel stood close enough that she could feel the shape of his quiet. Neither spoke. The sky above the canal had turned a deeper blue, streaked with white, that looked like erased handwriting. The air smelled faintly of rain returning. And then, without ceremony, he touched her arm, a gesture so simple it might have been an accident. She looked up, and for a heartbeat there was nothing to interpret, only the plain recognition that here stood two people who had wandered too far into a sentence to stop at the comma. He bent toward her, slowly enough for her to step away if she chose. She didn't. The kiss was soft, tentative, shorter than memory would later make it. Warm, careful, full of apology, even as it happened. When they parted, she tasted tea, rain, and the faint salt of unshed words. She spoke first. "We shouldn't have. I know." Still, she whispered, "Yes." The world resumed around them. Footsteps, laughter from across the bridge, a bicycle bell slicing through the air. They stood a moment longer, two still figures in a moving scene, and then she turned, beginning the slow walk home. That evening she said little. Thomas talked about a deadline, about a client who wanted a staircase that floated. She nodded, answered when needed, moved through the kitchen like someone in another language. Later, when he reached for her, she kissed him back with gentleness, but not with presence. He fell asleep quickly. She lay awake, eyes tracing the ceiling's faint light, her heart steady and loud at once. She thought not of the kiss, but of what it meant, that she was capable of crossing a line she had spent her life drawing. The thought did not make her proud or ashamed. It made her aware. Boundaries, she realized, are not walls built once. They are gardens that must be tended daily, or weeds will write their own map. She rose quietly, walked to the window. The city was blue and cold at once, the glow of lamps against water. She imagined the bridge, the reflection of two figures now gone. Somewhere out there, Michiel would be doing the same, or trying not to. Her phone lay on the desk. She opened it, saw his name, the unsent message box waiting. Her thumbs hovered. "We need to stop," she wrote, and then, after a long pause, "But thank you for reminding me what honesty feels like, even when it hurts." She stared at the words until the letters blurred, then pressed send. The act released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. She set the phone down and wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the weight of consequence settle. Not cruelly, just firmly, like a coat heavy with rain. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves scraped the pavement. A tram's bell echoed once, distant and solitary. The city continued its unhurried breathing, indifferent yet somehow comforting. Eva returned to bed. She lay beside Thomas, and listened to the small, sincere noises of domestic peace. His breathing, the clock's quiet insistence, the roof's answering sigh. Between each sound, she placed a thought like a stepping stone. You are human. You can choose again. Tomorrow begins as always, with rain, with coffee, with care. Sleep came slowly, then kindly. And when it did, it carried her across the night like a ferry, across water steady, deliberate toward a shore not yet visible, but certain in its direction. The letting go morning arrived as a pale wash of light over the canal, soft enough not to wake the water. Eva opened her eyes to that quiet grey and lay still, unsure whether she felt heavy or clean. The message she had sent the night before sat somewhere out there in the world. Unread or read it no longer mattered. It existed, and that was enough. Thomas stirred beside her, turned and kissed the air near her temple before leaving the bed. He had early meetings. The rustle of his routine filled the apartment like distant waves. Coffee grinder, running tap, the familiar closing of the door. Then silence. She lay in the after sound and let her breath find its own length. She did not cry. There was nothing to mourn that had ever truly lived. Yet the stillness felt newly shaped, like a room after furniture has been moved a different geometry of absence. She made coffee and stood at the window. Rain again, thin as sewing thread. Across the street, a woman shook a rug from her balcony, droplets scattering like tiny stars. The ordinary continued its rehearsal. She whispered to herself, "That's good, because ordinary is what saves us." Her phone blinked once, a single light in the grey. A reply. She hesitated, then opened it. "You're right," Michiel had written. "We should stop. Thank you for not pretending we could hold something that was never meant to be kept. I'll remember your kindness, not the confusion. The simplicity of it undid her. No anger, no plea, only truth laid down like a folded coat. She read it again, then deleted the thread, not from bitterness, but mercy, to clear the space where echoes might multiply. She placed the phone face down and walked away. That week, she gave herself to small tasks. She reorganized the shelves, sorted receipts, trimmed the basil that insisted on living. She took longer walks, even when it rained, letting the city's rhythm steady her pulse. Amsterdam in autumn is good at consolation. The smell of baked bread drifting from doorways, the hush of cyclists gliding through mist, the way leaves collect on water and float together for a while before parting. One afternoon, she stopped on a bridge and leaned over the rail, watching circles spread where rain touched the surface. Each ripple met another, merged, disappeared. She thought, that's how endings work. contact, expansion, silence. She began to write again in her old notebook, not letters to him, but fragments of thought, as if translating her own mind back into her native language. You can miss someone without wanting them back. Peace is not excitement, but it lasts longer. Love that stays must also be allowed to rest. At work, colleagues noticed her calm. She smiled more easily, listened more fully. It wasn't joy exactly, but steadiness, which is the seed of joy. The editor she assisted remarked, "You seem lighter." Eva replied, "Maybe I finally stopped arguing with the weather." Evenings with Thomas found a new gentleness. He didn't ask what had changed, only seemed relieved by the softness in her shoulders. They cooked together again pasta, soup, pancakes on Sunday. Domestic quiet became music, its tempo rediscovered. She found herself laughing genuinely at his dry remarks, grateful for the ordinariness that once bored her. Perhaps boredom is only peace misunderstood. Yet, sometimes, when the light hit the water just right, she felt a tug, faint but unmistakable, a memory of being looked at as if newly invented. She let the feeling exist, then exhaled it away, like smoke from a candle. You don't have to kill every ghost, she told herself. Some will fade if you stop feeding them. Weeks gathered into a small, clear pattern. She went to yoga on Thursdays, baked bread on Saturdays, called her sister more often. She bought a moon-shaped lamp for the hallway after all. When she plugged it in, the glow spread across the floor, like quiet forgiveness. Thomas loved it. It makes the nights kinder, he said, and she smiled, thinking, yes, that's the point. Winter arrived early, sharp and crystalline. The city wore frost like jewelry. One evening, walking home from the market with a loaf of bread under her arm, she caught sight of her reflection in a shop window, head pulled low, scarf bright against the dusk, and she liked the person looking back. Not radiant, not new, but whole. At home she lit candles, poured tea, and sat at the table with her notebook. Words came slowly, each one deliberate. Today, I did not think of him until now. That feels like progress. Though I know progress isn't a straight line. I want to remember that restraint is not loss. It's the art of making room for what deserves to stay. She closed the notebook, the candle's flame trembling in the draught. The room smelled of wax and cinnamon, and something clean, maybe air, learning to be trusted again. Later, lying beside Thomas, she felt a quiet gratitude, not dramatic, but foundational. Life had returned to its normal shape, though she knew normal was not the same as before. Something inside her had widened. She could love more honestly now, not because she had been flawless, but because she had been human and chosen kindness afterward. When sleep began to pull at her, she whispered into the dark. "Thank you for the lesson." She wasn't sure to whom she spoke. Maybe to Michiel, maybe to herself, maybe to the night for carrying both. In her dream, she stood again by the canal, but the water was calm and glassy. Across it, the figure of a man waved once and turned into light. She didn't chase it. She simply watched until the reflection faded, and then she turned homeward, the moon lamp waiting like a promise behind her door. Morning found her peaceful. She made coffee, opened the window, let the air in. The city sounded busy and kind. Somewhere a church bell counted the hour, and she smiled, thinking of how easily time forgives us when we finally stop resisting its mercy. She took a sip of coffee and whispered a small prayer to the ordinary. May I never forget how to begin again. The cup steamed between her hands. Outside, Amsterdam shimmered in its gentle grey. The bridge plank sang its E minor note when someone crossed it, faint and familiar, like the past keeping rhythm at a distance. Eva listened once, then turned back to her day, light enough to move, rooted enough to stay. The return of light spring did not arrive all at once. It came in gestures, a braver shade of green on the plane trees, bicycles unbuttoning their bells, windows opening a cautious hand's width to test the air. Amsterdam released its shoulders from winter and remembered how to gleam. The canals, so patient all season, began to carry a livelier blue. Eva woke earlier now, not out of urgency, but because the morning had more to say. From the bed, she could see the hallway lamp, her small slice of moon dim in daylight, its glow asleep. Thomas was sprawled diagonally, one foot somehow out from under the blanket, as if part of him always wanted to be elsewhere, while the rest remained steadfastly home. She smiled, tucked the blanket back over his ankle, and tiptoed to the kitchen. Coffee, open window, the rattle of a bicycle lock, the soft percussion of footsteps on wet stone, a gull declaring something only gulls understand. She held her mug and looked at the city as if it were a friend recovering from a long illness. Color returning to the face, appetite coming back. The notebook lay open on the table, a page half filled with ordinary sentences. She had decided some weeks ago that the heroic thing for a heart to do is not to perform grandly, but to keep good company with small days. She wrote one line, "I am learning to be loyal to what is quiet." Then she set the pen down and let the line breathe. Work found its rhythm again, edits, emails, the clean pleasure of a paragraph that finally fit. Her colleagues planned a spring outing. Sandwiches on a borrowed boat that would trundle along the canals at a pace considered both safe and amusing. Eva volunteered to bring fruit, and laughed when the fruit vendor insisted on an extra pear for luck. The boat trip was a success. They misread the map and added 20 minutes to the journey, floating past houses that leaned into their reflections, like friends swapping secrets. Someone pointed out a heron standing in a garden, like an artwork. Someone else confessed he couldn't tell the difference between a heron and a stork. No one corrected him. At home, she and Thomas found new conversations, not heavier, just clearer. He had begun noticing the hallway lamp's glow, the way one notices a well-chosen word, not flashy, simply true. It does make the nights kinder, he said again, stopping in the doorway to admire the small pool of light. Sometimes I wake at 3 and go to drink water, and it feels like the house is holding my hand. She kissed his shoulder, almost shy with the tenderness of the image. They took evening walks after dinner now, a habit spring invited back along the canals. Young leaves lifted like soft applause. Thomas told her a project had been approved, a staircase that indeed would float, though he admitted it would rely on more steel than the client wished to imagine. She teased him about making illusions honest. He teased her about writing footnotes for feelings. They walked the long way home because the long way is what lovers choose when time is generous. Once, on such a walk, they paused on a bridge that was not the bridge, but sibling to it. The plank that sang in E minor lived elsewhere. This one offered a different note, a faint wooden hum that felt like consent. Eva leaned on the railing and watched a cluster of leaves spin in the eddy below. The past stirred, as the past does, polite but present. She acknowledged it without inviting it to dinner. Thomas laced his fingers through hers. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That the river knows everything about letting go and still seems full," she said. "You're becoming very river," he answered, smiling. The city kept teaching. She visited the photography museum alone one afternoon, drawn by a new exhibit of rooms without people chairs, with the warm dent of recent use, tables littered with a perfect mess of living. Standing before a print of a kitchen at dusk, she felt a pang so mild it was almost sweet, recognition without craving. She thought of Michiel, the way one thinks of a town visited long ago and loved for a weekend, a place you don't move to, not because it failed you, but because home is home. In the gift shop, she chose a postcard of a window looking out on the rain. On the back, she wrote a sentence that wasn't meant to be sent. "Some doors I leave closed, not from fear, but from reverence for what stands behind them." She tucked the postcard into her notebook like a pressed leaf. On a Sunday in May, the market filled with peonies, those deliberate explosions of pink and strawberries that tasted like stories from childhood. Eva bought both. Back home, she cut the peony stems on a bias and listened to the tiny hiss as they met water. The vase looked like abundance had been rehearsed and finally premiered. She sliced strawberries into a bowl and sprinkled the slightest sugar, though they didn't need it. Except the celebration sometimes asks for sparkle. Later that afternoon, rain visited briefly, the friendly kind that rearranges dust and leaves a shine. She opened the window and let the house breathe. Thomas napped on the sofa. Books played face down on his chest like a compliant bird. She watched him sleep and felt the particular gratitude of choosing the same person after waking into yourself more fully. Evenings found their way toward pockets of silence that didn't have to be filled. She read aloud to him from an essay about patience. He, amused, read aloud labels from the hardware store catalog, imbuing screws and brackets with operatic drama until she laughed the deep laugh that starts somewhere honest. The moon lamp cast its mild light across the hallway, patient as ever. Passing it on a midnight water trip, she reached out once and touched the shade, a gesture of thanks to an object for its service. She smiled at herself for doing it and did it again anyway. The letter, the drawer, where she had once placed the unsent letter, stayed closed most days. Occasionally, she opened it, not to reread, but to confirm that some choices live better as artifacts than as actions. The paper smelled faintly of cedar. She had placed a small sachet there, because memory is kinder cedar scented. She did not burn the letter or throw it away. She let it be evidence of mercy. Work sent her to Utrecht for a single meeting in early June. She debated the ethics of telling Thomas and told him. She debated the ethics of telling herself she might see Michiel and decided not to. Not because she feared what would happen, but because the person she had chosen to be deserved the ease of not testing herself when no test was required. She took the train in the bright, the fields scrolling by with their green paragraphs and commas of cows. At the station, a woman offered her a flyer for a concert. She accepted it and stuck it in her notebook to remember that spontaneity can stay in print. The meeting was brief, cordial, artifact-free. She ate a sandwich in a square where the sun decided to speak Dutch all afternoon. Returning to the station, she passed a cafe whose walls really were the color of old paperbacks you carry on trains. She stood outside for a moment and smiled at the accuracy of a description. Then she kept walking. On the train home, she took out the postcard of the rainy window and turned it over. The unwritten side had softened with time, but still kept its blank promise. She put it away and looked instead at her reflection in the train window, superimposed on fields and sky. For a moment, she saw two images of herself, one choosing, one chosen. She blinked and let them become one. June deepened. A friend asked her to help set up a small backyard dinner. She threaded fairy lights between branches, tied linen napkins with thin blue ribbon, and practiced the art of seating people who would be kind to one another. At the table, she listened more than she spoke, noticing how stories braid when people feel safe. Later, walking home under the forgiving dark, she realized she hadn't thought of the almost story once that evening. Grief had become a quiet neighbor. On the first truly hot day, Thomas came home with ice cream from the shop she loved. Pistachio for her, dark chocolate for him, 2 spoons. Emergency summer protocol, he declared. They ate sitting on the floor at the open window, legs stretched, shoes kicked somewhere. Outside, the canal held sunlight like a secret it intended to keep. Do you ever feel like we have more of us now than we used to? He asked suddenly. She considered. Yes, she said. Not more pieces, just more presence. He nodded, satisfied with a truth that didn't need proving. I like it, he said. I like us like this. That night, the sky refused to darken completely. Amsterdam shimmered in the long dusk. Eva lay awake only to marvel at the way light loiters in May. June. She rose and walked the apartment barefoot, each floorboard greeting her as old friends do. In the hallway, the moon lamp glowed at its lowest setting, the smallest halo of permission. She stood there and let the glow touch her ankles. By the window, she watched the soft choreography of late cyclists and the drift of a boat moving under the bridge without a sound. Somewhere, a piano practiced scales. Somewhere else, someone watered geraniums and spilled a little onto the sill. The city existed in countless small attempts at care. She pressed her palm to the glass and spoke into the room, not loudly, not to be heard. She spoke the way one writes a date in the corner of a page. I am grateful, she said, and I am me. The words did not unlock anything dramatic. They confirmed, they settled, they chose. When she returned to bed, Thomas turned toward her in his sleep, as if his body had its own compass. She tucked herself into the space offered and let breath take over. The rest of the work, from the street came the low hush of a late tram, then the soft applause of leaves answering a breeze. The moon lamp kept watch, and as her eyes drifted shut, she understood the lesson so simply she almost laughed. Love is not always the bright beginning or the fierce middle. Sometimes the truest love is the gentle decision at the end of a long day. The boundary kept without fanfare, the promise renewed in the quiet. The night leaned in. The canal held its polished darkness. The bridge waited for morning feet to find its singing plank. The house breathed, the city breathed, she breathed. Sleep, like the boat's glide, arrived without splash. Sleep well, dear one. The room seemed to whisper back to her steady breath. You are safe, and the night will hold you. And when light returns, it will find you whole. The message she never sent, dear Michiel. There are nights when the city is quiet enough that I can hear the clock of the canal boats turning somewhere far away, and for a heartbeat it sounds like the rhythm of that afternoon we met the rain keeping time for us. It no longer hurts, but it hums softly, like a remembered song that will always know the shape of my breath. I have waited until the noise inside me was still enough to write this. Not to explain, not to reopen anything, just to place something tender back into the world with both hands. When we found each other, I think we both mistook recognition for destiny. We saw in each other the light that our lives had forgotten to tend. You reminded me that connection can arrive without warning, that it can look both pure and dangerous in the same moment. I will not pretend it was nothing. It was everything for a while, but it was also borrowed, and we both knew it. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we had let the moment break open, if we had stepped fully into the story that tempted us. And every time the answer arrives in the same quiet way, we would have lost the very gentleness that made it beautiful. I miss your words, but not the ache they carried. I miss the way you noticed the world. The rain, the bridges, the pauses between sentences, because it made me notice too. You didn't rescue me. You reminded me that I was still alive under the dust of routine. That is not a small gift. For a long time I confused longing with love. But love, I've learned, doesn't always demand to be lived out loud. Sometimes it asks to be respected, to be honored by not becoming something it was never meant to be. You were the echo that taught me that. Because of you, I started listening differently to the way Thomas breathes beside me at night, to the quiet courage in my own pulse, to the peace that asks nothing in return. There are moments when I still think of the bridge, of how easily kindness can tilt toward desire, how impossible it is to unknow a feeling once it has looked at you directly. But I no longer carry shame with that thought, only gratitude that we stepped back before the beauty turned to ruin. If this letter ever reached you, I'd want you to know I am well. I am not waiting for anything. I bake bread on Saturdays. I listen to the rain without reading into it. I am slowly becoming a woman I trust. You exist in that story quietly as a single line underlined in pencil. A line that says, you can feel something extraordinary and still choose the ordinary that saves you. I hope you are at peace. I hope your days are slow and kind, your mornings filled with coffee that smells like beginning, your nights without the weight of unfinished conversations. I hope the people who stand close to you see you the way I once did, completely, gently, without expectation. And if you ever think of me, I hope it's without ache. I hope it's like remembering a light that once flickered at the edge of a canal. A light that didn't last because it wasn't supposed to, but for a moment it made the water shine. This letter will stay here, folded in a drawer. It doesn't need to travel. It has already done its work just by being written. The world feels quieter now, and I finally know what love really meant all along. To care for someone enough to let them go back to the life that makes them whole. Thank you, Michiel, for the gentleness, for the mirror, for the reminder that my heart still wakes when called softly. You will never be a mistake to me. You will always be a lesson spoken kindly. With peace, Eva.